Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, the chairman of this Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this meeting of the committee. The meeting is going to be broadcast live as usual and recorded for playback on the council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? No. I just asked so that people at the meeting would know if this is happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated. Members of Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building, if necessary. Let's move on to our agenda for tonight then. Number one, we've got apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Rodwell and Councillor Mackay. I haven't heard from Councillors Cook and Cannon yet, so we'll assume that they'll be with us shortly. So moving on to item number 2, can I have the substitute members? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson for Councillor Mackay.
Lovely, thank you. We haven't got any urgent items this evening, but there was an urgent update to item 15, which was our section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy Working Group minutes from the meeting that was on the 3rd of October. These were circulated on the 8th of October, and we have got some paper copies available now. So I just want to check that everyone's had a chance to have a look at those. They're happy with them. If not, we can give it a few minutes so that you can have a read through. Is everyone happy? Nodding? Yeah, I can see nodding, so that's great. Item 4, visiting members. We've got Councillor English with us this evening, but he's presenting a report, so he's going to be introducing that later.
I may want to just make a brief observation as a visiting member on the SIL review relating to neighbourhood SIL.
Oh, lovely. So that's item 15, isn't it? Yeah. Great. So have we got any disclosures by members or officers? No. Any disclosures of lobbying? Nope. We're going to take everything in public this evening. Is this agreed? We don't have any petitions this evening, and we don't have any questions from local residents, and we don't have any questions from members. So that moves us on to item 12 of our agenda, which is the forward plan, which is on pages 3 to 14 of your agenda packs. So I'd like to just take a few minutes for everyone just to have a look at that, because it's quite busy now, there's a lot on. And really I want feedback from the committee, from everyone on these items, and just see if there are anything that we think, or you guys think, that the committee would like to conduct pre-decision scrutiny on. So just take a few minutes to read through and then I think. Councillor Reid, Parfitt Reid, sorry.
I was just going to make an observation that is the plan going to actually be updated, because we've actually got things out on here which have passed their decision date.
Which one? That one hasn't. At the time that the agenda was done, neither of those had the decisions. Yeah, that's what I thought. We've just got the first two, and I think at the time the agenda was published, we hadn't had the decisions made on either of those two, so they will be dropping off on the next one that we see. Yeah. Did I see Councillor Harper?
Thank you, Chair. Looking at this again, and I looked at it when it came out, the one thing that I can't see on it, unless I've missed it, is the strategic plan. Since this goes up to December, unless someone can quickly point out where it is, it doesn't seem to be on the agenda of any committee coming up. And I suppose it's difficult, obviously, until we see that, to actually be in a position to do a great deal of overview and scrutiny, because that's going to dictate what the council's planning to do for its remaining 3.5 years, once that's approved. But I was assuming that we would call in for pre-scrutiny some of the sort of items around perhaps the SIL bidding round 2, given our the working party and the work we're doing on that, and possibly I was wondering about the Heathland Garden Community Update, in the sense that Heathlands is a significant part of our local plan, and there hasn't really been anything in terms of any reports going anywhere for a year or more now. I mean, we used to have on the old Policy and Resources Committee a monthly update, but obviously that doesn't happen now. So I'm just thinking that it may well be that that might be an item we would want to do some pre-scrutiny over. Because obviously if Heathlands doesn't go properly, then local plan is in a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on those points or others on the forward plan? Councillor Field?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chair, but didn't we have we already asked about the financial mid-year financial update coming? Is that already on our programme? Because I'm pretty sure we had said we wanted.
Yeah, so what I'm doing tonight, I thought I'd keep you all on your toes because we haven't yet agreed the minutes. We're going to do this after the forward plan, but you will see in the minutes from the last meeting that you're quite right. We did ask for the strategic plan and the budget to come to overview and scrutiny. So I think I think we need to add those onto our forward plan, which is going to come is the next item. Well, actually, no, because we're going to go back to do the minutes and then forward to do our forward plan. So hold that thought.
On the matter of Heathlands, if Councillor Harper is proposing that, I'm more than happy to second.
Yeah, I'll formally move then that we call in for pre-scrutiny the Heathlands report.
And perhaps, as he's here, the Cabinet member could satisfy us with a brief update on his strategic plan. But yeah.
Well, I think it'd be clear that the precise timetable will be sort of decided by how enthusiastic a response there is to the members' workshop on Monday night next week, which I remind people there is an all members' workshop on the strategic plan that evening. So to an extent the timetable will be set by how many issues arise from that members' feedback. I'm sorry to be a little vague, but inevitably that is the position on that. In terms of Heathlands, I can tell you that the work has finally begun on preparing the development plan document, but obviously a fair amount of work has to be done before there's anything to present to this committee to actually preview. Otherwise, we'd just be giving you a sort of smorgasbord of undigested ingredients. We should be able to update you fairly soon once we've just completed the scoping exercise on the DPD, which is being undertaken at the moment.
Okay, so at the moment you guys have this on your forward plan for the 18th of December, so that's still likely to keep to that date as far as you know.
I don't think there's any reason to think it will slip at the moment, but you never know.
Okay. Right, that's good. Any other Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see that the housing allocation scheme review is coming up because there's quite a lot of residents in Shepway that are living in overcrowded situations, like 8 people in a 2-bedroom house, and they're not allowed to bid on a 3-bedroom house because there's maximum occupancy restrictions. So I'm really pleased to see that on the agenda and coming up. Thank you.
So that's on the agenda for the Cabinet on their forward plan. So when we get to our next item, then let's have a chat about whether we want to pull some of those to have a look at before it's approved. Great.
I'd like to make a discussion about that. Would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so now hold on to your hats as we go back to pages 1 to 2, which are the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of September. That most of us, I think, we're all here for. So have we got any comments on the accuracy of those minutes? No, so I move the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th September be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Lovely, thank you. Going forward then to item 13, which is our committee work programme. So now remember all of the things that we were just saying on the Cabinet Forward Plan. Currently, you can see that we've got our enforcement, the environmental and waste crime enforcement. So Councillor English is here to present that, and we can have a look at completing that tonight. We're currently working on the Section 106 and SIL and see how we can get some infrastructure delivered for our communities. We've started that with the working group, and then that's going to be fed back from the working group to the committee tonight, so we can all have a look at that. And then future, we've got the planning enforcement. On the page 16, that's where we've got our pre and post decision scrutiny. So there's an annual scrutiny report which Democratic Services do, so that's coming in February. And then we've got the capital programme on there, we've got the 4-plan monitoring. And then, so this is where we need to add in, as we were saying, the strategic plan and the budget. And then in the conversation that we were having earlier, we were talking about also adding in the SEAL bidding round 2, the Heathlands Garden Community and the housing allocation scheme. I just wondered what everyone's thoughts were on adding those into our pre-decision scrutiny plan. Councillor Harper?
I think it'd be a really good idea to call those 3 items in for pre-decision scrutiny, whatever it's called. I think especially as Joe was pointing out about the housing one, that's such an important policy, and some of the nuances in it, which if with people like Dan and Joe and experts in terms of housing of their wards, it'd be really useful for that discussion here, because otherwise something could easily slip through and the policy be adopted and it doesn't have the impact or whatever what we're actually hoping it to do. So I think that'd be really good to call here for pre-decision scrutiny.
Councillor Parfitt?
I was perhaps going to suggest that we invite the head of housing to the committee for the purpose of that, because I know from being in that cabinet role myself, an awful lot of that allocation policy is dictated by statute. So it would make sense to have him here, so that there's no point us suggesting things that if they can't actually be put into the allocation strategy. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. If I could ask our Democratic Services Officer that when we do that pre-decision scrutiny for the housing allocation, if we could invite John Littlemore, and also make sense to invite the Cabinet member as well for that item. Great, is everyone happy that those three things are added? Agreed? Great. Item 14 then is our committee our response on the environmental and waste crime enforcement review. So we're sort of in that legacy situation where Councillor English was the chairman of Overview and Scrutiny. So he's here and he'll be presenting on the work that Overview and Scrutiny have done on this. And then they can also present on how Cabinet have addressed the issues. And then hopefully we can all agree with that. So go for it, Councillor English.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, it is something of a confusion of hats I'm wearing in this discussion, and for which I apologise. Hopefully, because this was a discussion where there was a pretty wide consensus across political parties and independents of what we should be doing, that shouldn't pose any problems. Essentially, the overview and scrutiny report was presented to me and the rest of the cabinet. We've looked at it and we have pretty much accepted or already implemented all of the recommendations that were in the report, with the exception of a few that are still ongoing or a couple which are outside of our total control as a council. I would particularly like to say that our staff, and not just our staff in the waste crime section, but our communications staff have been incredibly proactive in following through on one of the areas of work which the committee in the past, and indeed councillors in general, were very keen to see done, and that is publicising our efforts to clamp down on waste crime. You may have seen the rather effective appearance of our staff on the BBC One show. You may have suffered through my own appearance on Meridian more recently. That's just two examples. More locally in the press, we've been getting a lot of publicity, and this is important because we need to deter future crime, not just deal with that crime that's already existing. So in terms of the other recommendations, like increasing resources going into the waste crime team and the technology available, we've been doing that, and we will continue to do that. I would hope that this is a priority across all the political spectrum in Maidstone. It's certainly a priority that I have in my inbox as a councillor every day to pursue fly tipping, littering and so on. One thing I would like to flag up that's happened since this report was written and the scrape was written in reply to, and this is quite new. I did refer to it at last full council. Suez, as a result of some of the interesting things that have been happening with the waste contract, if I can put it like that, have decided that they are going to employ a project officer to work on the security of communal areas and communal waste bins, and to actually try and ensure that some of these incidents we've had where off-site fly tipping takes place and the contamination of the waste stream takes place, which means that the waste collection can't be collected because it's contaminated, is prevented. So we need to follow some of the promising leads that we've had in working with social housing providers and other stakeholders to try and make sure it's not just us as a council, but other stakeholders that are working on this. And we've also had some positive feedback amazing, from Kent County Council Highways. I mean, on some of the initiatives we've been taking recently to close some of the actual unofficial lay-bys, which enable dumping to take place in many of our rural areas. Now, those two things aren't in the scrape, but I add them for context. Where we have had a problem is the one thing we haven't been able to follow up completely is Medway Council have not come back to us on the issue of the sort of cold war between them and Kent County Council, which prevents residents using each other's facilities. We've tried a number of occasions to get a response, and we are still trying to pursue getting a response from Medway Council. They have responded on the other two issues we've raised, but they have not responded on that, and I'm sorry to say that I'm not particularly optimistic of getting any progress on that, but we will keep trying. That's the one area where I will have to report that we have not met with success. Now, procedural note, the committee can, because it's an iterative process, if they think there should be things added or further avenues to pursue, suggest that back to the Cabinet in your discussion of the scrape. You don't have to adopt or reject it as it stands. You can add suggestions or additional questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor English. So I'll open it up to the committee now for any comments on the scrape that we've got here, anything that you want to see added to it, to present back to Cabinet. Councillor Harper, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I think the response we've got here looks overall pretty good. You know, quite a lot of the suggestions have obviously been followed through. So that's quite pleasing. Now, I wasn't on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee last year when this report was being worked on, but clearly it seems to be an example of where, you know, a report goes from this committee to the Cabinet, Cabinet look at it and send their response back. And as I say, it looks in this case like most of the stuff's been taken up. One thing I wondered if we could perhaps ask Clive was it's just ironic. I was away at the weekend, and when I came home, someone had actually dumped some stuff right outside my house on the other side of the road, and the council chap came and was picking it all up. And I had a quick chat with him because, and I asked him whether he thought the fact that in Kent that you have to book a slot to go to a recycling centre is having a impact in terms of fly tipping. And he thought it probably was, and I think in some of the areas there has been, from what I can see, more sort of fly tipping and stuff being left by, litter bins, bigger items being left by litter bins, and I think there probably would have been in the past. And I just wonder whether the booking system for going to a refuse tip is deterring some people from using them. And I'm just, when I've been over the last couple of years since they've introduced it, the one in Allington, I went up one time last week and there was nobody there. It's not, very rarely do they ever use more than half of that dump, or the bays. And I just wonder if the stuff's being dumped, tipped as a result. So I wonder if there may be something to look into that, because other Surrey, our neighbouring county, they don't have that system. You just turn up and go, as it used to be here prior to COVID. I just wonder perhaps if it might be worth checking with perhaps Surrey and East Sussex as to, if there's anything in it. It could just be hearsay, but if there is evidence that perhaps a booking system leads to more fly tipping, then it might be something we might wish to take the evidence to Kent County Council with to see if they'd be willing to reconsider. I mean, obviously, I recognise it's not an NBC decision.
I'm certainly happy to look at it and see if things have changed over the last couple of years. My initial take, being fairly familiar with Tovel, which has a waste transfer station, was that the amount of fly tipping had reduced as a direct result of the booking system, because what had often happened at Tovel was people would turn up, get stuck in a queue down Burial Ground Lane for quite some considerable time, and then dump the waste in the hedge in Burial Ground Lane, or turn round and dump it somewhere else in Tovel or Lower East Farley. And the booking system had dramatically reduced that. However, just because that happens in the first year or so doesn't necessarily mean that it continues all the way through. So quite happy to go back and have another look at it and see if that's true, and also whether there's any difference between Tovel and Allington, because there might be.
Okay, I've got Councillor Hickson and then Councillor Wilkinson.
We do have some information, obviously, on the categories, but it's not as complete as we'd like. So I'm quite happy to see if we can get any further data on that.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting that where it says that Medway Council have confirmed their households are provided with one free bulky collection after free items since April 23, but it's disappointing to see that there's no cost-benefit analysis data there, because they said they haven't been able to get hold of it, but that would be really, I'd be really interested to see that data, to see if that has had an impact on fly tipping or not.
The problem is, I don't want to be rude about Medway Council, but I'm not entirely sure they've actually done the analysis. So I wouldn't want to commit to, they may have done the analysis, but I'm not sure they have, so I wouldn't want to commit to giving this committee information without the certainty of knowing that they've actually done the analysis. But we can inquire.
Okay, so we've got a few little bits that people wanted to add. So we were going to have a look at whether we could add in if the fly tipping had been reduced because of the booking system at Tovel, you know, as we've gone through the time period. And then we were going to have a look if there was any bulky waste data for what had been tipped. And then if we could ask Medway again about whether they had the data on their free bulky collection. We can try, can't we? We can try once more to ask them. Um, so is everybody happy if we add those three? Oh, Councillor Harper?
Yeah, on that last one, which Joe mentioned, do we, I mean, we obviously do a bulky collection, but we don't provide it free, do we? I can't remember because no, we don't, we used, did we ever used to or not?
A long time ago, there was essentially a free bulky collection, which was essentially what we did was we sent lorries, skips around certain selected areas, and people walked out and put bulky items in said skips. That obviously only covered certain areas, and unfortunately, it did lead to a rather large amount of builders' merchants' waste, which was not the objective being deposited in those. So that was why that was knocked on the head. Then we went over for essentially since then we've had a booked for, paid for system. It was quite and to be honest, it doesn't really cover its cost. But if we charge rather more, we'd end up spending more on collecting the items. So doing a free service would be quite difficult.
That's useful, Clive. No, I mean, it'd just be interesting to see what, as Joe was saying, if we can get anything more out of Medway as to, you know, what their experience is in terms of it. Because obviously the more we can think about ideas, which may just help address it, I think, as Councillor Hickson was saying, in terms of what's the makeup of the stuff, what tends to be fly tipped, it might give us some ideas of perhaps, you know, alternatives we could think of out of the box, which may help prevent fly tipping in the beginning.
Make an observation, like all scrutiny reports, this is a living document and won't get put on a shelf and not looked at again. So if issues come up, please make sure that they're fed in and so the document can be appropriately updated as we move forward, like all scrutiny documents should be.
Thank you. You've actually answered my question, which was that we got the high-speed roads, and then there was a presentation being worked on, and I was just thinking, is that the end? You've had it once and never again, but no, that's good. And then, so if we build those items in, and then it will go back to Cabinet with those extra items, will that be? I think also, we've asked Medway, you know, the Cabinet members undertake to ask them again. We can't force an answer out of them, so I think we can only do what we can, and I think we have had a good undertaking this evening to do that. So is the committee happy that we go forward with the scrape on that basis with those couple of additions? Great.
Thank you.
That moves us on to item 15, which is the current topic that we're working on, which is our Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy Review. This is an update from the working group. So we've had, if the committee remember, we've had one formal meeting where we made sure that we had the outline of what we were looking at correct and the things that we were sort of driving for. We've had two working groups where we got a bit of background. We had all the background documents from offices and had a look at those. The first working group sort of went massive with everyone's questions and everything they'd ever thought about infrastructure, Section 106 seal, and then it got refined a little bit when we had the Chief Exec and Section 106 and seal officer at the second working group. And so then what we're doing is to bring all this back tonight for you guys to look at and add to. But I'm going to hand over to Cassie now to introduce the report.
Thank you. Good evening, members. The report that you've got outlines what has been agreed so far by the working groups, as Councillor Russell mentioned, for the Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy Review, and it asks that you note the report. Attached at Appendix 2 is the current timeline, which may change as the review progresses. And at Appendix 1, and circulated to you yesterday, you will see the minutes from the first two working groups from the 26th of September, which was in the original agenda, and the 3rd of October minutes, which were circulated yesterday and are on your desks. The working group met with officers to agree actions going forward. So far, it's been agreed that research will be done into other local authorities, nearest neighbours through SIPFA, that's similar other local authorities, and also others in Kent that have non-parish areas and how they allocate their non-strategic neighbourhood SIL, particularly to non-parish areas. An item will be added to the final action plan requesting further training for members on applying for SIL, as it had come up that there might not be enough of that. Following discussion with Democratic Services and the Consultation and Engagement Officer yesterday, we're drafting a survey that is in progress to circulate to parish councils and members, expected to start from the 18th or 21st of October. And that the chairman and vice chairman will draft a letter to the Section 151 and monitoring officers at Kent County Council requesting an update on allocation of SIL and Section 106 monies, including progress of schemes funded through these routes. If you may wish to discuss with which external stakeholders it would be best to invite to future working groups, or to overview and scrutiny meetings, as they will need at least a month's notice. We have been provided with contact details for some of those from the SIL and Section 106 team leader. This is also an opportunity to suggest any questions you would like to ask them. And Councillor English has suggested before the meeting that he is currently undergoing a consultation process for neighbourhood SIL. So he's here if you'd like to ask any questions about that. And we're happy to take any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. I think so. There's a few different strands to this. So I think to sort of look at the neighbourhood SIL bit first, I think we all need to get a good understanding on what the neighbourhood SIL is, how much it is, and what happens between parished and non-parished areas, because I know that was a thing that came out of our first overview and scrutiny. So on that basis, we were going to do the questionnaire to go out to parish councils, but also to go to ward members where there's no parish, and just ask, how have you applied for it? Do you know how to apply for it? What have you spent it on? Has it been easy to demonstrate the community benefits, which is where I'm going to bring Councillor English in a second, for the things that you want to do? Because I think I might be right in saying that Councillor Harwood did quite a bit for the St Faith's Community Centre through the neighbourhood SIL, but as far as I'm aware, that's the only major thing that's been delivered through the neighbourhood SIL. I mean, obviously there'll be different amounts for every different area, but I think we all need to come, all councillors, I mean not just on our committee, come from the same basis of knowledge about how we could look to use that and how we can help our get our Section 106 and SIL officer, because they're only too willing to help us try to access that for the neighbourhood SIL portion, which remember is different to the strategic SIL. But Councillor English, if you've been doing a bit on that, do you want to come in?
Yes, and Councillor Harwood was the first one who did this, and it was, I believe, £31,000 was secured through the neighbourhood SIL route for the new St Faith's Community Centre, which was the amount left outstanding after, essentially after all the other funding sources have been exhausted. In High Street Ward, currently, Donna Grennan, Dinesh Katra and myself are approaching the end of a consultation period on 3 projects, one for play equipment at Collis Millennium Green, one for a CCTV camera at the same location, and another project for improvements to the South Park Pavilion, which is operated by the Nepalese community, but is also widely used by other community groups, including the Friends of South Park and the South Park WI. And so essentially, all that the rules say is that you have to carry out a public consultation. We've gone belt and braces in High Street Walk by putting a letter through every single door in the ward. However, well, you don't have to go to that length, provided ward councillors have a regular newsletter and social media. That was enough for the North Ward, as it was at the time, because ward boundaries have changed. Project at the St Faith Centre. As far as I can see, the rules are actually not as complicated as they might seem, but I believe that for borough councillors, the two projects of talking about the two consultations, I think there may have been a third consultation in Fant, but I'm not aware of where the situation is with that. But all I would say is that the basic bottom line is it has to be for a permanent improvement. There have been groups who've applied for grants funding for events, and they have been turned down because events do not meet the criteria of a permanent improvement to the community, which addresses a concern arising from planning. So there are other funding streams available for that, though, and we've directed people who have applied for that sort of funding to those other funding streams. I'm quite happy. I could talk about this forever, but actually it is a surprisingly simple process, but what it is labour intensive in terms of putting pieces of paper out to the community, or making sure that if you don't do it that way, that you contact the community by a number of routes. In fact, the largest number of responses I've got has also been because we also leafleted the mosque, the Baptist church, and All Saints Church, and we got quite a lot of responses from their congregations. So there's been a lot of spend on neighbourhood still by parish councils, because the route is a lot easier, far easier for parish councils to understand, or at least the bigger ones. I would say there's still quite a lot of ignorance amongst the smaller and medium-sized parishes, like my own parish of Detling, where we are just beginning to grapple with this process. But for parishes like Bearsted, it hasn't presented massive problems, I don't think.
Yes, I think that's where we get the variety of, at least trying to find benchmark where everyone is with it and make sure that we're all coming at it from the same place of knowledge. Councillor Harper, you had your hand up.
I think I referred to in the working party I went to about an exercise which Councillor Coates and myself have been doing since last September. So we started off September a year ago, talking to residents, going around every house with a couple of proposals to hopefully use community seal for. One was looking at a 20-mile-an-hour zone in a couple of streets to get people's feel on that, and the other one was around a greening project. So, as in a lot of in the urban area, Kent County Council over time has removed a lot of the street trees, and what we were looking at is a scheme, or what we are looking at is a scheme where a stock of trees would be purchased, and then residents could apply to put a tree into their front garden when they've got one, and sign to keep the tree for a period of time. Now, that met with unanimous support. I mean, I say we went around the whole ward a number of times to try to get as many people in as we could do. The 20-mile-an-hour zone didn't quite get that level of unanimity, but they both threw out various other ideas which we need to take forward. And to be honest, I haven't pushed them forward because I'd spoken with Stuart Jeffries, the leader, I don't know, before the elections last year, and he said, look, there may be a borough-wide suggestion coming up on 20 miles an hour. So I've put that one, I've got all the figures we've got. I can see Clive not nodding. But the tree one, the tree planting scheme, I'm while I'm in, the next few weeks, while I've got a bit of time, I'm going to start to scribble it out because I'll need to speak with our parks department and then work out how we can take a scheme like that forward. But it would ultimately lead to a significant change to the environment or the infrastructure of the area. So it'd be interesting to see whether it's how we can proceed with that. I think one of the issues in non-parished areas, as opposed to where you've got a parish council, a lot of our parish councils, for instance, run their own parks and open spaces. So a scheme like we're looking at trying to do in Fountain and Oakwood, where we don't have a parish council or a local depot, we'd be reliant on getting support from the borough council parks department to actually, to do this in practice. So I need to have some discussions with them on it. But I say that's just one of the issues. If you're in a parish, especially our bigger parishes, they tend to be running quite a few facilities themselves, so it's easier when you've got that sort of infrastructure there to then put a project on. But when you're a sort of individual councillors, as all of us from the urban areas are, without anybody working with us, it's much more difficult to do. And that's be an interesting area to sort of explore as we go forward. I mean, if we get progress, as say, on this sort of the greening concept, then obviously I'll keep everybody informed. And it's interesting to hear from Clive that, about the works they're looking at in High Street. But it is difficult trying to get out to try to have, for fairly sort of generic schemes in a ward demonstrating community support.
Thank you. I think if I can bring it back to what we're going to try and do going forwards, it is that making sure that everyone just has that knowledge about SIL, how you get it, how it's apportioned, strategic and neighbourhood, how it can be affected if your parish council has a neighbourhood plan, because obviously that drives up the amount, they've got a bit more, how they can access it and what they've spent it on, and then how the ward councillors in a non-parished area can access it and what they look to spend it on. I think for individual kind of projects that you're thinking of, just go direct to Carol Williams and ask her advice on those, because she's really helpful and I'm sure she'll guide you the right way on those. But I think for what we're trying to do for the benefit of all of the councillors, it's just make sure that we're all coming from that same level of knowledge. So that was kind of part one of what we're going to look at for this. Part two is a thing that's been going on for a really long time. Having attended many JTBs and chaired JTB, it keeps coming back to, where is the money that we gave KCC for the junction upgrades from the last local plan? So, and the county councillors said it from their side, and we've said it, and it's been minuted at JTB, and it's never really made any progress going through the channels that it's gone through previously. So hopefully a quicker thing that if everyone agrees that we could do, is ask the 151 monitoring officer, where is that? Pardon? Yeah, 151 monitoring officer, where is that 12 million? What's happened to it, because we need to know either there's actual plans for it and they're going ahead, or do we do something else? Big question, but I think it's worth starting it, because otherwise it's just going to continually rumble on. We'll get the same junction improvement or not improvement, junction stagnant report to JTV that goes forwards. So I think we need to know once and for all where we are with that. Big question, but I think it's definitely worth asking. That's like the second part. And then the third part was kind of when we wind back up to strategic SIL, and at the moment we've got the priorities list, and I know that one of the things that was talked about that Cabinet were going to look at is maybe doing an overarching infrastructure strategy for Maidstone Borough. They're going to have a look at it. So I thought that would be a really interesting thing for Overview and Scrutiny to get involved in and look at, to see, where do we think, and where do all the councillors think, the priorities should lie for some of the bigger bits of infrastructure, the strategic SIL, and whether there's some learning from the last SIL bidding round that we did, the one and only SIL bidding round that we've managed to do as Maidstone Borough Council, because obviously we did give some money for Junction 7, and that has gone nowhere and everyone's moved off site. So I think, you know, some other big questions about what do we think strategic seal should be going towards. And we were thinking on, this is where we're getting to, and I really want you guys to think about and come back to me. Hopefully we can talk this through tonight. Who would we want to invite to Overview and Scrutiny to have that bigger infrastructure chat with? So we can ask questions of them, and if you've got any questions in mind about what you think, you might want to ask them. Different infrastructure providers that would be potentially bidding for the strategic seal. So I don't know, throw that open to get your thoughts on that, really, who you think we might want to invite, the kind of questions that we might want to ask them. Councillor Hickson. I can't possibly answer that. I think that might be question number 2 after we've done question number 1. Where is it? So hold that thought. Oh, and you have to hold that thought because your microphone won't go off. Have we got another microphone, Councillor Hickson? His won't go off. And we're rolling. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. I think with regard to Councillor Hickson's question on SIL, I think it is, as you say, perhaps a two-phase approach. I'd welcome, and I'm not sure how much weight my signature will actually carry on a letter, but I guess we can find out. Welcome some assistance from the appropriate officers around the letter. What I would suggest to the committee is that we do frame the letter in terms of, can we have a fiscal breakdown? I believe I'm right in thinking JTB, and I think I've read the right papers, JTB papers have been published, and there is a report on the progress, but as I suspect was the case with previous reports from Kent County Council, there's no financial detail on how that allocation has been, and then we'll see what reply we get, and maybe from there explore what the legal options are with support from the relevant officers. I'd welcome any other views. Obviously, Chair and I will sign whatever letter we ultimately produce.
I think that's a sensible approach. Obviously, I'm going to sign it as well, but what does everyone else think? Are you happy with that? Yeah, no one else wants to come in? No? Happy? Okay, so that's your the KCC bit, and then what are we thinking about other people that we might like to invite here to ask questions of, or any infrastructure providers that we're thinking of? Obviously, we've got, you know, there's various ones: education, health, highways, all of the different things that you can think of, really, that go towards. I mean, we do the houses; it's all of the other stuff. So, anyone else? Councillor Harper.
Well, I was thinking perhaps we should invite representatives from South East Water and Southern Water to address us, because obviously neither of them put in bids. I think on the first round of SIL, when we did it, Kent County Council were the only people who actually responded to us, and the issues around water supply, but also sort of water leakage and, you know, sinkholes and all the rest of it in this area are becoming increasingly problematic. And when there's this money sitting there, you would think these companies would, I mean, probably say a drop in the ocean, but it's, in terms of their size of them, the money available from us. But you know, why don't they bid, or what sort of things would they bid for? Is it more than we would have the money for? And perhaps also the same with the health authorities, because again, some of the strategic SIL is looking at, you know, the needs of GPs and, you know, community health and so on. And we know in large parts of Maidstone you can't get a doctor, and, you know, you're more often than not suggested to go to A&E rather than try to wait for a doctor's appointment. And perhaps also transport, so local bus companies. So we've got Arriva and New Venture. Um, sorry. And Stagecoach, and also Southeast Trains, because again, some of this strategic seal could potentially be of use to them in terms of electrification of the bus fleet, looking at promoting, you know, our two community rail routes through the borough. Um, you know, and again, none of them bid the last time round. So, you know, it'd be to understand from them why aren't they bidding? Because these are the sort of people who you would think would be wanting to provide infrastructure if the money's coming free from, you know, from community seal. Um, and I suppose the other thing, perhaps thinking of trying to see, is if our officers can identify any authorities where they're perhaps further ahead of us in terms of the use of SIL for strategic neighbourhood or whatever, where we may be able to get some, you know, understanding from some other authorities. But I've no idea where they are, because obviously I only know where Maidstone does on it. So those were a couple of things which perhaps struck me as could be quite useful for us.
Yeah, thank you. I think also it'd be quite good to understand, maybe just on a quite high level, what um, timescales they look at for investment, because obviously something like South East Water and Southern Water, you know, we're on that 4-year rolling local plan cycle, aren't they? They're obviously on a lot longer timeline for investment in anything to do with, you know, if you were thinking of a new reservoir or something, you know, that's a massive timeline. But it'd be quite good to hear from them about what timeline they work to and how they plan and how far in advance they have to plan, and how both systems could kind of mesh together, to at least talk at different touch points going forward when we're all doing our various planning in different areas. I think that would be good. Anyone else? Councillor Wilkinson?
Just iterating what Councillor Harper was saying about public transport, I think it's really imperative that we have that discussion about that, because the links into and out of Maidstone for public transport is pretty dire, and I think if you improve those links, you have better growth in the town centre and also get reduced traffic. So yeah, I would be really interested in having a broader discussion with somebody from the public transport businesses. Thank you.
I think we've captured all of that, haven't we? I think I'd probably like to just throw one in about education, maybe, because I know that it seems crazy to me that I don't know why you'd ever close a school down, but you know, a secondary school closed in Cranbrook, I know that's outside of our area, and then it diverts a lot of people this way, and then with Paddock Wood building out, I think there needs to be a bit of a thought about how we key in with that process, maybe secondary and primary education, and at what point they ask for the money or don't they ask for the money. I know Marden is now an academy, and they had, you know, they had to get the money, but it was different to how they got it if they were a KCC school. So I think it'd be quite interesting to understand what they can bid for, what they can't bid for, what they do want, and the timeline for that. But I think that's probably enough. If we had all of them waiting, that is going to be a really useful but like long meeting. So I think if you're all happy, we'll extend invitations to some of the higher level infrastructure providers and see if they can enlighten us and how the timelines work, and why they didn't bid, because, you know, we weren't inundated with bids last time round, and what sort of levels we need to get to for them to be interested in that, in bidding for SIL money. And I think that might tie back into some of the work the Cabinet are going to be doing on looking at the actual SIL levy rates on the different things, because is it just that we're never getting enough money for some of the building that we're doing. So if that's what comes back from all these big infrastructure providers, you know, they're not building because it's just peanuts to them and they need a lot more, then obviously that might feed into some of their thinking that they're doing on the levels. Great. Anyone else want to come in? Councillor Oliver.
Yeah, just to ask on that, on the academies, because I know that a lot of them are expanding and they're buying into different schools. So they're obviously planning over multiple years. So it might be worth getting one of the heads of those bigger academies that are in the borough to come and talk to us as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because it does seem to be different, doesn't it? So it'd be quite good to just understand that. I think if we can just get our knowledge going forwards, you know, infrastructure is the one thing that everyone always mentions when you talk to anyone. So I think if we could get our heads around it, handle on it, and if we can see how we plan going forward, I think that would be a really useful thing to come out of overview and scrutiny and then go to cabinet to help them with their future decisions. I think we'll probably draw that to a close. We've got the timeline for the next working group, which is on the 17th of October. Obviously, if you can't make that, the people that are on the working group, then feel free to send a sub. Yeah, go, Councillor English.
Questions that were raised on the water industry issues are probably actually in the water cycle scrutiny review that was conducted last year. So it might be worth just skimming through it to see if the answers are actually there, because I suspect some of them are. And just on the public transport, it looks like I have been successful in getting, well, with some help from Councillor Clark, the bus forum up and running, and it looks like we're having a meeting next Friday to put that back into existence. So that will be able to take forward some of the issues that have been raised about bus transport at least.
Okay, so maybe if anyone on the committee's got any questions that they want raised in that forum, they could email them through to you. That'd be great. Perfect, thank you. That was our last item on the agenda for this evening, so I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.